Oh man, this is a really interesting one. How can I forgive my parents for mishandling money when I was a child?
Ooh. A lot of what we have to do as adults, unfortunately, is grieve for what we wished our parents had done in many ways. I wish my mom stood up to my dad more, or my dad was better with money, or had saved for my college education, or saved for anything. There's a ton of, or abuse, and there's all sorts of other issues we could really get into. But when it comes to financial decisions and what we wish our parents did, you just have to grieve. I think we talk about grief when it comes to someone passing away, but we grieve all the time. What we thought this relationship would be when we all of a sudden realize that our parents don't know everything and aren't good at everything.
Yeah.
I feel like that happens usually like in our late teens, early 20s when you're like, or I'm 36, so I'm like, wow, my parents really had no idea what they were doing because like I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and
Sure.
like you're just trying to figure it out. And so I think that's really the key to that is accepting the loss and then letting yourself express that loss. And that doesn't mean that you have to tell them. I actually wouldn't encourage you to talk to them about it because it's not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
What's done is done, but how do we move forward? So let it go. Maybe write a letter to your past self about all the things you wish you could have done, or you wish they would have done for you, or what that financial stability would have given you, or I don't know, whatever. Because I know that in a lot of ways for children growing up with parents that aren't good with money, it can be traumatizing. Like the lights are turned off, there's no food in the kitchen. So it's okay to tap into that young you and talk to them.
Totally.
Because in some ways we have to like reparent ourselves in the way that we wish it had happened.
And I agree with all of that. And I would add, like, it's so important to remember that financial literacy is something very few people receive.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of backgrounds that can lead to people being in a very disadvantaged place with money, whether you're an immigrant or you're caught in a cycle of poverty, or, you had an unexpected illness. Like, there are so many things that even people with the best intentions can be put in horrible financial dynamics. And even amongst people who are doing okay, real, true financial literacy is something most people even don't have.
Yeah.
So
well, people don't want to talk about it.
People don't want to talk about it. So I feel like at least putting it in the prism in your mind of like, I don't know if this person's parents were financially insecure, but understanding how difficult it is when you are in a cycle of poverty to get out of that cycle of poverty. And just having empathy for how difficult money is for so many people.
Yeah, and especially if we grew up not talking about it, or our parents, like if your parents, like your grandparents had their own weird behaviors around money.
Right.
Like if we look to that, because we look to our caregivers, usually it's mom and dad, but it can be grandparents or aunts and uncles or whomever. But we look to those relationships and situations as blueprints for how we do things.
Right.
And so if the way that your grandfather spent money was completely frivolous and out of control, not that you can't still be sad about it, but it can make more sense as to why maybe your dad does that or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Patterns also help me feel like a little more empathy for situations where I'm like, wow, you didn't actually know any better. That's hard,
Yeah, and I feel like that rule in general of like when people are behaving in a way that makes you upset, but often comes from a place of anger or hurt or defensiveness, or not handling some kind of injury well. Like, even if it's just a coping mechanism, I feel like saying to yourself, like, it must feel terrible to feel that way or to think that way. But for example, when you think about someone like who has, let's say, a compulsive spending issue, which can be obviously devastating if that person is your provider, like, that is awful, but it must be awful to be in the brain of a compulsive spender.
Totally. And we know how out of control that can feel and how scary and unsure they can feel about their future.
Right.
We know that we've all been there in situations where we haven't made good money decisions, or a lot of people have. And I feel like if you can just tap into that for a minute, you're like, they're not happy with it either. They just don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And having a little empathy and then giving yourself the time to grieve, I really think is like the best way out.
Yeah.
Versus the anger that I'm sure is being felt
and can be felt. But
of course.
But ultimately, if a parent or parents are severely mishandling money, they're hurting their child, but first and foremost, they're hurting themselves.
Yes. And they had money problems before you were around, I'm sure.
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, but it is hard, and it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to be upset. I was upset for years that my parents never saved for my college education, but it was mainly because they just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
What? You want to go to school? Oh, you know, which is fine. I'm thankful for it now because I appreciated school. I was serious when I was there. But you know, but me being angry about it now isn't going to help that.
Right.
So I just have to understand that wasn't a priority for them.
Right.
And that they didn't understand how important it was going to be.
Right.
And I know now because I've talked to my mom about it. You can talk to your parents too if you feel okay about it. But I talked to her about it, and she was like, she felt really guilty that they hadn't. And so, we're saying, like, I'm sure your parent doesn't feel great about their decisions either.